Hey, gang, this week's episode is brought to you by oldschoolshirts.com. Hey, check them out. You like defunct teams and leagues and T-shirt form? Well, you'll find them there, but a whole bunch of other stuff, too. Do you remember a radio station of the past or perhaps a mall that you used to go to? All kinds of great cultural and sports memories can be found at the great folks at oldschoolshirts.com. Promo code GOODSEATS for 10% off all of your purchases. And now, here's our show.
The regular season ends tonight in Dallas with a 6-3 loss. Dallas looking very, very tough this evening as they make up for a defeat they suffered in St. Louis. And you take a look at the MISL regular season Western Division Championship banner for Dallas. That was raised tonight. Ty, take us through the playoff picture once again.
Well, the Storm have lost, so now they have to rely on San Diego to lose to still have a chance to take that second place. If San Diego wins, it'll be third place. In that case, they won't have the home field advantage against San Diego. We'll have to wait till Game 3, and Game 4, if necessary, would then be played at the St. Louis Arena on May 1st and on May 5th. So the Storm lost to the second best team, really record-wise, in the entire major indoor soccer league. And maybe it was too tall of an order, really, to expect them to come in here to play against a team in front of a huge home crowd that has a great home record.
Ticket information, all seats reserved now, $12, $9.50, and $6. Playoff tickets will go on sale Monday at the arena box office. And if you have questions, please, operators are standing by, so go ahead and give them a call right now. 781-6475. Ty, any parting shots there?
Well, the Storm finished the regular season, their first year of operation, with a 24-28 record. But they did set a couple of records. That 24 wins is the most ever by an expansion team. They also had 9 road victories, the most ever by an expansion team. So a good year for a first-year team.
I agree, and they were 3-2 on KPLR TV. Thanks to our crew here in Dallas. For Ty Keogh, I'm Rich Gould. That's it from the Reunion Arena in Dallas. So long.
Welcome to Good Seats Still Available, a curious little podcast devoted to exploring what used to be in professional sports. Here's your host, Tim Hanlon.
All right, let's do this. How are you, my friends? It's Tim Hanlon, your congenial host this week for our latest episode. Yes, what is this? It's called Good Seats Still Available. It's our curious little podcast journey that we like to do for you each and every week that's focused on the various stories in and around what used to be in professional sports. Thank you for finding us, downloading us, putting us in your earbuds, however you're ingesting the proceedings this week. We thank you profusely, and you have come to the right place. If all of what I've just described to you is intriguing to you as it is to me, the various nooks and crannies and divots and pivots of forgotten sports history, mostly pro, but not always, forgotten teams and leagues, defunctness, relocated endeavors, leagues and propositions that have come and gone, events that captured our fancy and then all of a sudden disappeared. Well, that's what we do around here. And we love, especially the background stories, the people who are in the trenches for some of these crazy adventures that, maybe didn't seem as crazy in the moment during the time that they were going on. They were gigs. They were things that people were pursuing. They thought there was money to be made or a sport to be nurtured and all that kind of stuff. And we love, especially those names that perhaps you've never heard of before. And this is easily one of those cases this week. Our guest this week is Bob Wilber, and he is an interesting cat and then some, and you're going to thoroughly enjoy if you love these kinds of defunct things like I do. This conversation it's revelatory. You may remember previous conversations with similar folks like Doug Verb and Michael Menchel. These are examples of people who have built careers literally trapezing between teams and leagues and startups and events and promotion and marketing and general management roles and selling tickets and all the various things needed to create, nurture, make successful, maybe not necessarily adventures in sports. And Bob's story really came to my attention as I was doing some other research for some other guests, both past and come in the future. When I stumbled across his great book that was new to me, it came out in 2017, And the title really gives you a sense of what he's all about. It's called Bats, Balls, and Burnouts, A Life of Sports, Marketing, and Mayhem. And I'm like, wow, tell me more. Well, I didn't have to really even go into the description of the book too deeply because I was looking at the cover of this thing. And on it is a middle-aged gentleman holding a baseball bat, but dressed in a pit crew outfit in front of a stock car, and behind it a funny car, a drag racing car. But also in his left hand holding a soccer ball of all things. I'm like, okay, well, what's this? And I looked closely and it had the logo of the Major Indoor Soccer League on it. Okay, tell me more. But it wasn't the rocket red MISL ball that we usually associate or connote with the original MISL's existence, perhaps very iconically. No, this was a white ball with red pentagons on it. And the logo is really hard to see, but it's sort of embedded in there. And I did some research and I recognized, well, wait a minute, this is the league's ball design from really kind of the latter part of its existence. And that just led me to more and more. So what I found out about Bob, as will you in this conversation, is that among many, many interesting stops in sports and sports marketing and stuff, and we'll talk about virtually all of them, 3 of them were in this sort of interesting time, if you will, in pro soccer's history in this country, and in particular indoor soccer and the death rattles of the MISL in the late 80s, early 1990s, the appearance of this thing called the NPSL, the National Professional Soccer League, which itself was a challenger league or a minor league known as the AISA to the MISL back in the mid-80s, and had now grown into become and all of a sudden became the successor to the MISL, and even the CISL, which we've talked about with various folks like Ronnie Weinstein and our old pal Ken Tomash with the Indianapolis Twisters, that indoor league that played during the summers. Interesting stuff, and we've nibbled around all of it. But Bob uniquely is a thread through all of them, and we're going to talk about not only that, but also the various teams that he was involved with, like the St. Louis Storm of the MISL in the 1989-90 season. They being actually an expansion franchise replacing the old Steamers of the original MISL. People forget the Storm being a new version of indoor soccer in St. Louis after the amazing story of the Steamers who came and went pretty quickly. The Kansas City Attack, Bob Wilber was part of during the NPSL's early years as its own league in 1994 through, I think, 96 or so. Kansas City Attack themselves were a revisit to Kansas City's indoor soccer story, the original MISL with the old Kansas City Comets. And the aforementioned CISL, Bob was also part of too for an adventurous number of months in 1996. With the then known as the Indianapolis Twisters. And you're going to hear an interesting set of stories there about how they were limping along in their earliest months of existence, some of which we talked about with Ken in our previous episode with him. But you're going to get a sense of just the instability, the audacity, the inventiveness, and the sheer resourcefulness of not only these teams and the leagues and the people who were powering them, but also just generally of sports overall, especially in leagues and in situations that weren't, quote unquote, stable or multi-decade historically rooted and fledgling, shall we say. And Bob Wilber's story is just an amazing journey across all kinds of stuff in and around those realms. And an interesting story. It starts with his dad's Major League Baseball career. It's as Bob gets out of college, he gets into helping various minor leagues teams of the majors, but it also drags him into all kinds of marketing and promotional hijinks for all kinds of leagues and teams and situations. And you're going to thoroughly enjoy this conversation coming up with our guest, Bob Wilber. Again, the book is called Bats, Balls, and Burnouts, A Life of Sports, Marketing, and Mayhem. It is available, as they say, wherever good books are found. Of course, you can find convenient links to it in this show description, however you're getting this episode this week, or on our website, of course, at Good Seats. Still available, where we post all of our episodes. In this case, episode number 433. You'll find all the convenient links there as well. And Amazon will deliver this book to you in paperback or Kindle versions as quickly as humanly possible. All right, so let's not waste any more time. This is an adventure and then some. Truly sit back and enjoy this conversation with Bob Wilber. We had it about a month and a half ago, only now getting it to you. Again, please, as always, enjoy. Our little bent around here is focused on stuff that doesn't exist anymore, and the funkness and stuff, and all the diaspora that has come or has not come from that. And doing a ton of research about various things, and I come across your book, which I had not seen before.
Which one?
Well, the one with the picture with all the stuff that you're balancing, the bats, balls, and burnouts.
Yeah,
right?
bats, balls, and burnouts. So that's my autobiography. Yeah.
And so bats, balls, and burnouts. Right. Okay. Sounds interesting. And then all of a sudden, I look really close. I see the NHRA card there. You see a baseball bat. Okay. But then I zoom in on the soccer ball he's holding. and it's not only is it an MISL soccer ball, but it's not the rocket red one that we're used to when we talk about the league and that show and that kind of stuff. And I'm like, and there it is. Sure enough, there's the MISL logo, and they're like, I got to talk to this guy. So here we are, and I'm just ecstatic to have you on the show and stuff. But before we get into your indoor soccer stuff, how about a little background for those who are uninitiated to the world of Bob Wilber, because you're kind of one of our sort of unicorn types out there, because you've been in all kinds of stuff, mostly in sports, but about a lot of sports related things that seem to come and go pretty quickly. And it seems like those are just planks in your platform of a career.
Yeah. I discovered as I was writing Bats, Balls, and Burnouts, I discovered something called Plow Forward. And that was never in my mind. That wasn't supposed to be part of the plot. It was just going to be a straightforward autobiography. And I just kept noticing as I wrote it myself that as time went on, I'd have these great opportunities. I'd be doing things I really loved, and some obscure thing would come along. And sure enough, I would just say to myself, yeah, I'll go do that. And when you make those kind of decisions, some of them work great and some of them don't. But I think you learn more from the ones that don't. Versus, sometimes success is really just luck dressed up like success. But the failures, when teams fold out from underneath you, or sports start to go belly up on you, or things you can't control, that is stuff you can't control. And I just hardly ever saw an opportunity I wouldn't try. Why not? You only live once, so that's kind of how I did it. And I never really got into anything that I wasn't personally interested in. I grew up assuming that I would follow in my father's footsteps. He played in the major leagues.
All right, so let's start there, because that'll give us a bit of a sense of sort of what your trajectory was into college and then some. Tell us about your father, obviously your mother as well, but your father obviously was semi-famous as having more than a cup of coffee in professional baseball, right?
Yeah, he played 9 years in the big leagues. With the Cardinals, Phillies, and Red Sox. He was pretty much a career backup catcher. Although with the Red Sox one year, he had his most games played in at-bats and hit his most home runs in one season and stuff like that. But he was a solid major leaguer. And let's face it, in 1946 up to 1951 or 3, a solid backup would be a superstar today. So I think the most he ever made in one season for salary in the big leagues was about $9,000. But
this is your dad. That's what it was then. Yeah, this is your dad, Dell. When do you become conscious of the fact that your dad is a major league catcher, and all the things that come and are part of that dynamic, the travel and the teams being traded and being what of it do you remember, and or when did you sort of realize that your dad didn't have a day job like most of the other dads did?
Well, that's a great question, and it's got a couple of different answers. Number one, I'm the youngest of 5 kids. I never saw him play. I was born in 56. His last year playing was 53, I think. And the year I was born, 56, he was technically in the big leagues. He was the bullpen coach for the White Sox because one of his dear friends, one of our family's best friends in St. Louis, was Marty Marion. We went to the Marion's house as often as we went to our next door neighbor's house. And Marty took the job as manager there and brought my dad in as the bullpen coach. So, but I'm just born then, right? So I don't remember any of that. My earliest memories of my dad, and basically my earliest memories, was the summer I went from 3 years old to turning 4. And my dad was the manager of the Charleston, West Virginia Senators, the AAA team of the Washington Senators. And we moved there for the summer. I'm a 3-year-old kid. I just remember sitting on my mom's lap at Watt Powell Park in Charleston, looking down on this field under sketchy lights. And it hit me that that's my dad down there in the third base coach's box. And even at that age, I thought, he doesn't work in a factory. This is a little bit weird. And from then on, I was quite cognizant of all of it, but I've always wished that I had my birth order would have been a little different and I could have seen him play. But he went on to manage a number of years. And I got repaid for that because as in high school, well, I'll take that back a little bit. He also ended up about 90 days short of his major league pension. And back then, there was no half pension. You either got it or you didn't. And my dad had been the top scout for the Minnesota Twins all throughout the 60s. So from when I was 4 until I was 14, growing up in suburban St. Louis, I was a kid wearing a Twins hat. And now I live in the Twin Cities. So it's kind of interesting that came full circle. But the thing was he was working for the Twins. He was 90 days short. We were not rich. He never made enough in the big leagues. And he had a pretty good friend from his days with the Red Sox. You might have heard of him. His name was Ted Williams.
Oh, yeah, him.
Yeah, that guy. And Ted called him and said, hey, here's what I want you to do. I want you to quit that job with the Twins, and I want you to come be our bullpen coach for the Washington Senators in the big leagues, because big league coaches get service time too. So we moved to Washington that summer, lived in Bethesda, and I got to go to RFK Stadium every day the team was home and run around the outfield shagging fly balls hit by big leaguers. And that was magnificent. And Ted single-handedly got my dad his pension. That's the kind of guy he was. He could be a gruff guy to the press and the reporters, but amongst his teammates and friends, he was as good a friend as you could ever have. And I think that's evidence of that, right? And he and my dad passed away like about a week apart when they were both in their 80s. And it was just an honor to know that my dad had gotten that pension that kept us, paying the mortgage because Ted made it happen. And then after that, after he got his pension, the Senators decided, you know what, we could really, rather than you just sit out in the bullpen here, we'd really rather have you manage our AAA team in Denver. So that was 1971. And I got to go spend that summer at Mile High Stadium as a bat boy. I was just a freshman in high school, I think, and run around the outfield in Mile High and get to know all of those guys that were his players who loved him in Denver. And
was that the Bears? What was the nickname?
That was the Bears back then.
Yeah.
Denver Bears. And then the next year he went back to Denver and I went back with him. And so I got to spend 2 years there. And then the next 2 seasons, Washington lost their working agreement with Denver and they moved their AAA team to Spokane. I, by then, was getting to be middle of high school and a pretty good ball player. You run around an outfield in the big league stadium for a while and you become a pretty good outfielder. And I felt like, well, heck, my dad was telling me that by my senior year in high school, I could have played the outfield in the big leagues because I had been playing the outfield, catching balls hit by big leaguers, and my arm had really developed and all that stuff. But so I get to Spokane, and I'm too old to be a bat boy, and I basically just wore a uniform for those 2 summers, hung out in the bullpen, warmed up pitchers, got to know all the guys on that team, and it was a joy to just be kind of part of it, go on all the road trips, especially the 7-day road trip you took to Honolulu to play the Islanders. I got to do that. And that's how it went. By the end of that, when I went off to college, I got a full scholarship to Southern Illinois, Edwardsville. And when I went off to college, I had all of that in the bank already. I'd already done all that stuff. I had a lot of experience being around real high pressure situations and, real famous people, and a lot of really, really, really good ball players who I watched every day and picked their brains whenever I could. So, that got me, all the way through college, and all that skill that I picked up running around all those ballparks. They helped me out a great deal. And then Detroit offered me a contract after my senior year, and played 2 years in their organization, down in Lakeland, Florida, and in Paintsville, Kentucky, in the Appalachian League, and Lakeland was in the Florida State League, with some guys that went on to play in the big leagues. One of my best friends on the Lakeland team was Howard Johnson. So you get to know all those guys, and it was a real joy. But then the Tigers in '79 drafted Rick Leach, #1. He was the guy who was the quarterback at Michigan, but he was a terrific baseball player. And they needed to make room for him on the Lakeland roster. So they let me go. And the next day, the Oakland A's offered me a contract, and I went out to the Northwest League, all the way from the Florida State League. I had to be there in 24 hours to play for the Medford A's, and did that for 1 year, and then got hurt real bad. I got hit in the face with a bat accidentally thrown by my teammate. I still have the scar underneath my right eye to prove it. And it broke my teeth, and I couldn't eat. And I just, all of a sudden my game went away because I was just malnourished and in great pain all summer. And sure enough, the A's said, thanks for playing. Here's the home version of our game. And the Toronto Blue Jays offered me a job as a scouting supervisor. So I did that for 5 years, and that sums up my career in professional baseball.
Interesting. And that how did you choose SIU Edwardsville at the time? You were obviously playing college ball at the time too. And if I'm not mistaken, SIU Edwardsville at that time, or around that time, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, was actually kind of knocking it out of the park with soccer those years, right?
Yeah. I mean, the soccer team was world class. They won the national championship, and there was some weird rules back then about, we were Division II, but you had the ability, I think, at least in soccer, to go up and play in Division I if you wanted to against those teams. So they ended up going all the way to the national championship and beat Indiana. And I also went to a high school, St. Louis U High, which was an all-boys Jesuit school that was a soccer school. And there were a bunch of guys from high school who went to SIUE with me, so we all know each other. And we were a little jealous as the baseball team, because the athletic director at SIUE at the time was the head soccer coach. And things like uniforms and buses and things like that were a little different between the soccer team and us on the baseball team. Their big road trip of the year was to the Netherlands, and ours was to Myrtle Beach.
Slightly different experience.
But as the years went on, we all became good friends. I'm good friends with a lot of those guys now, and they all played in the NASL and then the MISL, and we got a lot in common because I ended up being a huge indoor soccer fan.
So you had a little bit of understanding then about at least the somewhat ragtag U.S. born or U.S. domiciled player path into what was, quote unquote, the professional game around that time, both outdoors, and then fledgling around that time was the beginning of indoors.
Right. Yeah. And nowadays I have a little different viewpoint on it. I love the Premier League. I love soccer. We go to see our Minnesota United team play, and the indoor game is hard to find anymore. It's still out there. But I remember at the time thinking, when I saw my first indoor game, it was St. Louis Steamers in front of 19,000 people at the arena in St. Louis. I mean, the Steamers were just a phenomenon in St. Louis. And I remember saying to myself, this might be the best balance of action and scoring of any sport, because there aren't enough goals in outdoor soccer. There's usually not enough in a hockey game. Some baseball games can be 1-0. But watching an indoor soccer game where it's just nonstop shooting and scoring, it's like, yeah, it's typical game is going to be 10-9, but each one of those goals could be the one that wins the game. So you're engaged from the first goal on. And then there's no great drought of no more scoring for another hour and a half. So I thought it was a great game, and I still enjoy it to this day. I stream as many games as I can, and I enjoyed it. I'm glad I did it, and I kind of got to live that dream. In 1989, the Steamers had folded, unfortunately, and a new team came to town called the St. Louis Storm, owned by a Yugoslavian millionaire, and
well, let's not
actually,
let's not overlook him, because he's not just any Yugoslavian millionaire. Because
no, he's not. He was Milan Mandaric.
Yeah, and he was very instrumental in some of the earliest days of the outdoor leagues, but certainly in the Bay Area in particular, right?
Yeah, and I think he's still involved in Europe. I might be wrong about that, but I think he was over there as a part owner or involved with a few teams in whether it was the Premier League or Serie A or what, I don't remember. But he was instrumental, and he came in with his own money. And I was working for my brother at the time, my brother Del Wilber Jr., who had at that time one of the biggest, most respected international sports marketing companies in the world. And I was having fun doing that. I was flying off to Italy and other places and working with Major League Baseball teams on their IBM sponsorship that we got for them, and making sure that went well. And sure enough, I'm liking life, and I'm working for my brother. And as my brother said, my last name was already on the door. And I heard about the Storm coming to St. Louis, and I went to my boss, who was a senior vice president, and said, "Hey, I'm interested in that. And do you think there's any way you could get me an interview?" And he said, he was a famous sports marketer too. His name was Larry Albus. He worked for Anheuser-Busch for years. And Larry said, "Well, have you asked your brother yet?" I said, "Larry, no, because if you can't give me an interview, I don't even want him to know I'm thinking about it, because I work for my brother." So he said, "No, let me check." And sure enough, the next day I got an interview. I went down to meet with Milan, and they hired me as vice president of marketing and sales. And I got to go to work every day at the St. Louis Arena, which was a dream. This is a place I grew up in, watching hockey, basketball, you name it, concerts in high school. I mean, it was an institution in St. Louis. It was
AKA this is also known as the Checker Dome at the time, right? Or
it was a Checker Dome the years that Ralston Purina saved the Blues franchise and bought them. Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
That's
how it all ended up with me. I ended up being we fired Milan actually fired the original general manager they had hired. Now, keep in mind, they hired me about 60 days before their first ever opening game. And when they hired me, we didn't have any players. We didn't have uniforms. We had a logo, but we didn't even own a soccer ball. So we had a lot of ground to cover in a couple of months.
All right. Well, let's put this in perspective, right? So this is a team that basically came about in the summer of '89.
Right.
The season started a few months thereafter. Now, set the tone for us, because this is 1989. This is what, 2 years after the Steamers had whimpered away in what was arguably maybe the beginning of the end of the major indoor soccer league. Maybe not obvious to everybody, but here you had another team coming in, albeit with Milan Mandaric and the king of all the indoor coaches, Don Popovich, was the coach of this team too. Pretty good pedigree to kind of get going. But the reality is that the Storm was not. What was in your mind from a marketing perspective, and what was in Milan's mind in terms of indoor soccer? I mean, was it just going to be Steamers 2.0, or was this a little less thought through?
Great question, and one we discussed a lot. Are we going to try to come up with something completely different, or are we really just trying to tap into the fact that the Steamers didn't fold because people lost interest? They folded because the original ownership group sold them at their peak for a lot of money. And every group after that owned the team had less money, right? And thought they were getting it for a song, and this will be great because the Steamers used to pack the place. And that day was over, and we didn't have the money to market. We didn't have the money to promote. like the Steamers did.
And nostalgia at that point wouldn't have worked for you either, because the name was different and the whole ownership again was different.
Exactly. Now, all that being said, one of my proudest moments in sports was the fact that on opening night, we had scrambled to put that team together. The crew for the arena was that afternoon running hair dryers over the Storm logo on the floor because the paint was still wet. That's how bad it was. But we put a great team together, and you're right, Pops you couldn't have had a better coach. And we put 14,500 into the arena that night, 13,500 of which were paid. And I remember Milan saying, "Oh, that's wonderful. Do that every night." Like, he doesn't understand, does he? It doesn't work that way. But we did the best we could. I think we averaged about 8,000 a game. And it was a wonderful, wonderful experience for me. Unfortunately, and I'm not talking out of school here, but as much as I respected Don, he's the guy who got Milan into it. And I know he sold Milan a deal of, hey, the Steamers made money. They didn't. The Steamers packed it every night with paid tickets. They didn't. They paid a lot. I mean, they had a lot of paid attendance, but he convinced Milan that they could just walk in here and make money. They'd make $1 million. And of course, we lost close to that because it wasn't there anymore.
But this is also your first sort of real, VP marketing type gig, right? I mean, you had gotten your feet wet with Converse prior to this, and obviously working with your brother's firm and that kind of stuff. But in many respects, this is the first time you're, I don't know, not say sticking your neck out, but you went for this job, you got it. And how do you, what's going on around you besides the things that you can control? What's going on in the league and that kind of stuff? Because this was also around the time where even the name of the league was going to change. And frankly, the outdoor game was also just dead and buried. So there was not a whole lot else going on out there except for some minor league sort of soccer stuff outside.
Right. Well, in the MISL, and that was a mistake to try to change the name. Earl Foreman did not get that one right.
Well, I do want to get into that too, to the extent that you know it, because I know you left. I want to get the timeline correct too of when you left and that kind of stuff.
Well, at the time, you could sniff the fact that the MISL was not what it was in the heyday of the Steamers, the Comets, the New York Arrows, all of that, Cleveland Crunch, all of that. It was not there anymore. It was still good. I mean, we could still go to San Diego and play in front of a full house. We'd have good crowds from time to time that looked full. Kansas City was still doing pretty well with it at the gate, but it wasn't easy. It wasn't, you just could, put out the schedule and people lined up to buy tickets. That was the phenomenon that the Steamers were. The whole city of St. Louis just went nuts over it, right? And I can remember as a fan going to buy tickets and, standing room only. Yeah, I'll take them. They're playing New York. I want to see Jungle. We'll take standing room.
They bent the shape of the entire league those early years, because we've had conversations talking about people remembering Earl Foreman like just dragging potential owners to a Steamers weekend game just because that was the pinnacle, and it was like the CISL was there. I mean, it was like almost like the center of this universe for a period of time.
Yeah, and then the third or fourth ownership group, they just didn't have the capital, and we didn't make money. We lost money. Milan did not enjoy wiring money to our checking account so we could make payroll. I was firm in my belief, and I did this again when I actually became the general manager of the Kansas City Attack in the NPSL. I was a firm believer in John Spolstra, who wrote the book on how to turn around a floundering franchise, and in his case, it was the Portland Trailblazers. And the number one rule was stop giving tickets away. That's an ego boost for the owner. That's all it is, and it makes that owner go broke. So I did that. We held the line on the tickets. We held the line on prices. The last thing I ever wanted with either of those two franchises was for one fan to sit down, turn to the stranger next to him and said, "Hey boy, $10, pretty good job. I like this game for this kind of money." And the other guy going, "Oh, I got my tickets free at the grocery store." You hated that because that would just dilute the value you had. I actually got my first general manager experience in St. Louis because they fired their first pick as the GM before opening night. And all of a sudden it was, okay, now you're going to do his job and your job.
So
You're
you
not
get
the
a promotion
GM.
before the first game.
Yeah, well, I didn't get promoted to a title of GM, and I didn't get paid anymore. I just had to do both jobs. And I worked long hours. We all did. I'm taking credit for that. I had a staff I put together who were go-getters. That's what I wanted. I wanted them to live, eat, breathe, drink indoor soccer like I did. And that's not easy when you're running a sports franchise. You almost invariably have a few employees that just want a job. And so, I was very proud of what we did there. But when the season ended and Milan looked at the books and all the red ink, he sent his lawyer to the arena and they fired every one of us.
What then? What do you take from that? Is it, I'm going to find something else in this MISL thing, or what? What do you?
I didn't know.
You didn't know. Okay. But the moving forward thing you mentioned earlier, right? What's the process of you moving forward, quote unquote?
Well, that's probably my first inkling of that again. The first plow forward was leave your brother's company where your name's already on the door and go with this expansion team in the MISL, and then get fired. And I go back to my office after the lawyer told me. He said, "I'll never forget it." He told me, "We're going to let you go. Do you have anything to say?" I just looked at him and said, "As you were," got up and left. I wasn't going to talk him out of it. So I went back to my office and my entire staff is in there, pale-faced and sweaty. And they're all looking at me like, what are we going to do? Can you help us? What are we going to do? And I remember telling them, it was a Friday. And I told them, look, I'm pretty sure none of us are going to get jobs over the weekend. So let's go to happy hour. And that's what we did. And everybody calmed down and we sat at a happy hour in Midtown St. Louis and talked about what the opportunities were. And I told everybody to, hey, hang in there. If you panic, you're not probably going to make a good decision on what you do next. And I said, but I wouldn't expect any of you to get a phone call on a Saturday offering you a job. Well, as it turned out, I was sleeping late the next morning in my apartment in suburban St. Louis because I didn't have any job to go to. And my phone rang and I picked it up and it was Roger Morningstar, former basketball star at Kansas, who had been my original boss the first time I worked at Converse as a Midwestern sales rep and promotional guy. And this is Saturday morning, the next morning. And Roger calls and says, "Hey, I know you love what you're doing. You love that indoor soccer thing. Man, I need a new guy out in the Southwest to cover 7 or 8 states out there doing pro team promotions, signing athletes to endorsement deals to wear our stuff. Would you even be interested?" And I didn't even fake it. I said, "I'm in. Let's go." So after I had told my staff that no one was getting a job on a Saturday, I got a job on Saturday.
So walk us through the next couple of years, because if one looks at your website and the timeline and stuff, there seems to be a lot of overlaps and almost simultaneousness, but I can't sort of figure it all out. But this, in many respects, it seems to me like this almost sets a little bit of a template for one's career in and around sports promotion, sports marketing stuff, especially in and around, say, the sports and the leagues that are not necessarily, the big four, so to speak, back in the day, right? Doesn't mean that there's not a lot of stuff out there, but we've heard similar stories, right? Of there's lots of bouncing around and stuff, and you have to not only believe in yourself, but also be, your North Star is a little bit different than trying to climb a ladder. You're seeking the experiences and then the excitement and maybe some ground level stuff, which is a bit more entrepreneurial maybe than most corporate types might be, situated for.
No, you're absolutely right about all of that. The belief in yourself, excuse me. I have a little bit of a raspy voice here because it's sub-zero here and we owe humidity. We have so little.
I'm with you, man. I've been, it's literally 1 degree below zero here in suburban North Chicago, and wind chill's about 15 below. So, and I'm from New York, so this is still new to me. years and
Okay.
years later. So I'm with you and I'm here for you. And I'm sure
Okay, thank you.
I'm sure our audience, a lot of our audience can sympathize.
Yes, I imagine. Anyway, where were we? So I go out there to Southern California, and quite frankly, I enjoyed parts of the job. I really could not stand other parts of that job. So my job was to sign X number of Major League Baseball players, NFL football players, NBA basketball players, and college basketball coaches to endorsement deals. And, you paid them to wear your stuff. And this is back in the day when Converse still had Larry and Magic and Dr. J.
Would this also include the CBA at the time, Continental Basketball Association?
No, we didn't do any work in the CBA. So I'm out there anyway, and I take over this job from a guy who had kind of failed at it. I always hated that. And, like then you're expected to do miracles. And I loved working with the baseball players. I had a bunch of guys that were just fantastic wearing our stuff. And I had the whole offensive line of the then LA Raiders. I'm still in contact via social media with Steve Wright, who was one of the linemen. And
one of our former guests, Mr. Wright. Yes.
Is that right?
Yes. We talked about his survivor story and all that stuff.
Well, I'll tell you why I liked Steve so much was that the first time I went to call on the Raiders, they were having their fall practice, their preseason practice at a grade school in El Segundo. And I had to go run up there and meet these guys. And I didn't know anybody. And I parked my car, walked in the front door, and a big, gigantic guy holds the door for me. And I said, well, thank you very much. And he said, where are you headed? And I said, well, I guess I need to see the equipment manager. He goes, follow me. I'll take you there. I'm Steve Wright. I play offensive guard. I'm like, he's gigantic, right? And I'm like, he's so nice. And he took me down and introduced me not only to the equipment guy, but all the other linemen who had been in Converse the year before and wanted to still do it. And he just really made a huge impression on me. And years later, when Facebook is something everybody's messing around with, I see Steve on there, and God, I wonder if he'll even remember me. And he did. Of course, he remembered me. So there was all that, and I loved all that. I liked working with the athletes. That was great. But I want to tell you, college coaches are a handful.
Now, this is the early 90s, right? This is not the handful we know today, which is on a whole nother level, but still, back in the day, there's a hustle going on.
It was amazing what we paid them, because you couldn't pay the players, right? They're amateurs. Way before they were paying college players to play. And they, whether it was a small Division II school or UCLA, those guys all felt very entitled, very bossy. And if you didn't just bow down every meeting, they would call your boss and say, this guy you sent me out here, he's not coming up to UCLA twice a week. I live down in Dana Point. If you've ever been in LA, driving from down there up to UCLA is about a 4-hour trip on the 405 freeway.
It looks closer, but you get on the road and it takes forever.
You can't get there. It's unbelievable. Excuse me. And so yeah, that wore me out. And even worse than the college coaches were these, and this was just getting big back then. It was all those summer camps, right? Everybody's got a camp. Everybody's got the elite basketball camp for high school kids. And Converse was very active in that. So I kind of had my hands tied. I had to, kind of wait on these guys hand and foot, give them everything they asked for, because Nike was just exploding. And if we said no to any one of those 100 camps in Southern California, we were in Nike shoes tomorrow. So that was really tough. That really got to me. And I was getting depressed. I was traveling so much. I was so busy. And all of a sudden, again, out of the blue, a guy named Bill Kentling called me, who you probably remember as the former commissioner of the MISL.
Okay, very important name. I want to let's segue that. This is starting to make a little bit more sense. Go ahead.
This is the overlap that you were talking about.
Yep.
And Bill Kentling calls me and says, "Hey, this is out of the blue, right? I'm in a hotel in Scottsdale because I'm calling on the Cardinals football team and probably a couple colleges in town, and I get this phone call, and I'm now looking back on that. how the heck did he find me at the Marriott in Scottsdale? I don't know. I don't understand that. That doesn't make any sense to me. But sure enough, my hotel room, we didn't have cell phones then. My hotel room phone rang and it was Bill Kentling. We knew each other from soccer. And when I was working for my brother, I talked my brother into having us represent the MISL. And so I got to know Bill very well when he was the commissioner. And we did a magnificent deal for them with Three Musketeers. It was going to be league wide and make them a ton of money. I'm sorry I'm digressing, but these are all part of the story. The All-Star game that year was at the Forum in LA for the MISL. We took the three top executives from M&M Mars and Three Musketeers to the All-Star game. And they were literally going to make a speech in front of the entire delegation that they are now an official sponsor of the MISL and that every team would have a Three Musketeers promotion. And at that, before the guys got up to go talk, the new team in Long Island, the New York, what were they?
Express. This was the supposed successor to the Arrows legendary franchise in the earlier part of the decade.
They went up to the microphone first and said, "We regret to inform you all that we are folding the Express effective immediately."
This was in the middle of the season, wasn't it?
In the middle of the season, and we're at the All-Star game with this huge sponsor from M&M Mars. And they looked at me white in the face. And, you know, of course, we're doing everything. Oh, don't worry. This happens all the time. Everything's fine. It's going to be good. Be a new team take over. And I mean, we got back to DC where our office was, and my phone rang the next day and said, you know what, we're going to look somewhere else, because if it's that unstable, we don't want to put our money in it. So that was so that's how Bill Kentling knew me anyway. And he calls and says, "Hey, look, I just took a job as president of this racetrack in Topeka, Kansas." He actually did it funnier than that. He said, I took this job as president of this racetrack, and I want you to come be the general manager. And I said, "Bill, I don't really know it. That's one sport I don't know much about other than the Indy 500. Do you have that?" He says, "No, we got a drag strip and a road course. But I don't want a racing fan. I want a marketing guy. Racing fans just want to meet the drivers. They don't want to work." And I'm like, bingo, I'm in. So I called Roger Morningstar and said, "Hey man, you know, this isn't for me. I'm basically miserable with a lot of this job. If I just did the pro athletes, I could do this forever, but I know that's not the way the job works. I got this offer to go work at this racetrack with a guy I know from soccer. I know I'm killing you here, but I think I got to do it." And he understood. We're still friends. And he didn't like it. He said, "Next time I offer you a job, turn me down." I think that's what he said. But so because of that, I packed up and moved to Topeka and spent a year there as the GM of the track, which really meant that I didn't like schedule the races or have anything to do with the race cars. I was in charge of sales and marketing and promotions.
And for a quick note, Kentling was also, before he was the successor to I guess it was Francis Dale, who took a year after, or Foreman did, was the commissioner of the MISL. He was the general manager of the Wichita Wings, so he was already in Kansas. So this makes sense that this comes in from a Kansas perspective.
And Bill's background was he came from Pizza Hut, which is based in Wichita.
Yep.
So that's how he got involved with the Wings, and then that went from there. He was a great commissioner. He was a great guy. I really enjoyed working with him. We still are in touch every now and then on social media, but I really thought I thought the world of him. I wouldn't have picked up and left Southern California for Topeka, Kansas for nobody.
But it gets you introduced to something completely different that you clearly took a liking to.
I knew hardly anything about. So it was a crash course, and I learned, and it was great. I put a great staff together. I don't know if you've ever heard of Jade Gurse. Jade was my PR guy there at Heartland Park. He went on to be the PR rep for Mercedes in their sports car Le Mans series, and then became the PR guy and manager for Dale Earnhardt Jr. for about 10 years. He wrote a couple books about Dale. But having a PR guy like Jade, I didn't have to worry about that. Jade, do this, this, and this, make it happen. And he'd make it happen in an hour. It was amazing. So we put a great staff together, and I realized What I didn't like about it working at a racetrack was that you couldn't win or lose. You just hosted the event. And I was always about winning or losing. You know, every job I'd ever had, from playing baseball to scouting to being a part of the Blue Jays uh, and even Converse, it was winning and losing, man, in soccer. And I lived and died for that stuff. And here I was, all you could do is sell as many tickets as possible and hope it doesn't rain. Because when it rains, we didn't race. What I did notice was the track did not make much money on the road course, but it made all of its money on the drag strip. And they had an NHRA national event, the biggest thing you can have from NHRA. And it was that was eye-opening to go meet those drivers. It was a whole different atmosphere than the other forms of racing we had had at the track, who were kind of snooty, don't bother us. They put fences up around where they work on their cars. The NHRA pit area is open. You just walk right up and stand next to a car if you want to, meet the drivers, get autographs. And I thought, well, if I like it, it's a fun sport to watch. It's motorsports for people with ADD, because you get to see a new race every 3 minutes. And I just really enjoyed drag racing, and I made that decision that, okay, I really don't want to work. I like Topeka. It's a nice town, but I really don't want to do this where I don't get to win or lose or be part of a team. I want to be part of a team. So I talked to a friend at NHRA who I had met because they were at our track, and he said, I know this guy. He lives in New Jersey. He represents 2 funny car drivers and a top fuel driver, and he needs a PR person right now and a vice president. So sure enough, what did I do? Plow forward. I packed my car up and moved to New Jersey. And
all places, where in New Jersey, as he asks the New Jersey native on the other side of this conversation.
I gotcha. Wyckoff.
Okay, so I'm from a town called Hohokus, so I was a stone's throw from Wyckoff.
That was a beautiful,
not necessarily known as the motorsports capital of the world, Wyckoff, New Jersey, in Bergen County.
No. So anyway, and that guy, it turns out, was really, really impossible to work with or for. I basically made it a year before I had to just say, look, it's your personality. The first day I got there on the job, well, first of all, we weren't working in an office. We were working in his basement, which made me feel like an 8-year-old kid when you dress up like your dad with a briefcase and go down in the basement and have a play office. It felt like that. And I walked in on our first day and I sat down, and he is screaming at somebody on the phone. And I'm not going to generalize and say all New Jersey people are like this, but let me tell you, I was totally unaccustomed to this coming from St. Louis in Southern California. And he's screaming at whoever he's talking to, calling him names, dropping F-bombs, you name it. I'm just white in the face. I'm shocked. I'm sitting behind my desk. I haven't even said hello yet. And he gets off the phone. I said, holy cow, who was that? He said, that was that damn Chuck Etchells, our funny car driver. He's an idiot. And I just looked at him and said, Bill, he's 80% of our income. And you're screaming at him? He goes, well, he deserved it. I'm like, I remember thinking right then, it's my first day on the job, and how long am I going to last here with this kind of thing going on? And I did, and I made it about a year. Bill, the guy who owned the place, we came to an agreement that I would move out and move up to Harriman, New York, and work from home. And every time, this is how archaic this was, every time I would write a press release or anything for the PR, I would put it on a disc, and we would drive to a Dunkin' Donuts halfway between, and I would give him the disc. But we had both realized we just couldn't sit in the same room together. So, so after that, heck, you tell me. I forgot what happened after.
Well, all right. So okay. So you've gotten now. So let's reset here. You've come up with a baseball sort of pedigree. You've done the shoe rep thing, gotten a lot of sports and sales and support kind of experience there. You've done support with your brother's firm, and then you've had a taste of some general management opportunities with the Storm and indoor soccer and in Heartland Park, which got you sort of at least a nibbling on the racing thing. How does the Kansas City Attack indoor soccer team come back? How does indoor soccer hit your radar again now that you're in Harriman, New York, of all places, and doing stuff in and around funny cars?
I'm going to want to know at the end of this if you think I had the most unusual stories you've ever heard.
Well,
This is another one.
Some of this makes sense given what we've learned over the last number of years with the craziness of sports promotions. I still think to this day, but even back in the day, right? There's no straight pathway here. But I also have to think at this point, around this point, that you're also psychologically thinking, when the heck am I going to be able to stay in a place for more than a year or two and not, have to like pick up to break a lease and all that kind of stuff as well. So I'm really curious as to what's in your head at this time, because you've got a whole lot of experiences.
Yes.
It's really interesting to see sort of I'm curious as to what the thought process is.
Well, some thought processes are voluntary and some are just thrust upon you. And when I knew I had to leave that guy's company in New Jersey, I just said to myself, look, I've been running that for him. I could run that company better than him right now. I do all the work. He just screams at people on the phone. So I'm going to go hang out my own shingle. I'm going back to St. Louis, where I can live 15 minutes from my mom and dad, and they'll feed me if I go broke. And I'm going to try to do this myself. I'm going to try to have my own agency. And I signed 2 drivers to be my clients. We made absolutely no money together. It was a great experience. They are still dear friends of mine. One drove in the Pro Stock class, and the other was the European Funny Car champion, a guy named Norman Wilding, who came to the U.S. to see if he could play at that level with his funny car. And I learned all the failures. I learned all the pitfalls, and I'm like bleeding money. But these guys were so supportive, and they still are to this day. 2 of my best friends, Lewis Warden was the Pro Stock driver. And I recall sitting there at my desk at my apartment in St. Louis thinking, if this was worth a shot, I'm not ready yet. I don't have a big enough name in the sport yet. I'm getting these 3rd-tier drivers to let me represent them. And that's hard to sell for sponsorships and stuff like that. God, what am I going to do here? I'm looking at a checkbook and I'm not sure I can pay the rent. And once again, the phone rings. And one of my employees at the racetrack was a guy named Doug Greenwald, who he and I got along really well. He's a good kid. And we hired him out there because we had met him. He was the intern of the year in Major League Baseball for the Royals. And he was a good kid and he really wanted to work. And when I went off to New Jersey, he just started doing some other stuff, and he got a job with the Kansas City Attack the year they came to town.
All right, explain that for our audience, because this was there are 2 aspects to that. Number one, they were in another city, and number 2, theoretically, or not theoretically, technically, they were actually in another league in Atlanta.
Correct. The MISL had folded by then, and a bunch of teams, not a bunch, but a few, decided to join the NPSL, National Professional Soccer League, which was lower salaries, lower salary cap, smaller venues, smaller crowds. But it was the indoor soccer league. That was the only one you had left. So,
and that itself was the evolution of something previously known as the American Indoor Soccer Association, which at the time was, for a number of years, sort of this, I don't know, minor league feeder to the MISL back in the day.
I think that's accurate. It officially wasn't, but there were no rules about being free agents really. So a guy would have a good game in Canton, and we'd lose a forward, and boom, all of a sudden he's on our team, the next day. So from the AISA. But anyway, Doug is working for the Attack. I'm sitting at my desk looking at red ink in my checkbook, and he goes, "Hey man, I know you love again. Hey man, I know you know what you love what you're doing, and I just told our owner that I wanted to give you a call. I don't know if you're interested in this at all. Blah blah blah. Would you even consider coming over to Kansas City to interview with the owner and his vice presidents about becoming our general manager? We need you." And I said, "When?" "Tomorrow? Absolutely." And I went over there and met Don Kincaid and his sidekicks, who were vice presidents, and they offered me a job on the spot to come in and basically save the day. And it was a mess. I was shocked at that dinner meeting that they brought the books with them. and opened the books and showed me how much money they were losing.
Now this is they had been in the. I'm guessing this was around. This was a few years into their. They were in the NPSL.
Yeah.
In Kansas City. That the NPSL was basically 2 years kind of in the background of the MISL. MISL, and then called the MSL, had basically dissolved in 92. And this is now what, 1994 or so, correct?
Or yeah, in there somewhere around there. Yeah.
Okay.
I kind of lose track of those years, but that's right. And yeah, so the first year the attack came to Kansas City from Atlanta, where they had been the Atlanta attack for no good reason other than both names started with an A. And the Comets would not give up their name. So the team just thought, well, the best thing to do here is just not reinvent the wheel. We'll just be the Kansas City Attack. And they showed me the books, and sure enough, they were giving away 5,000 tickets a night because the owner couldn't stand to see empty seats. And I said, well, we can't do this. We've got to learn to sell tickets. We put a pretty good staff together, but Doug Greenwald was the guy that if he didn't make that phone call, assuming I probably would say no, I never would have gone to the attack, and that was really a success for me. We turned that team around.
You had some great years. There was a championship season in 92, 93, but this is we're talking about. Based on what I could tell, you had 2 or 3 seasons or so where they not only were in the playoffs, but they were in the finals one year in 95, 96, and then they were champions the year after that, which is maybe when you just handed the mantle over. That's
right. Yeah, exactly. We were good. We had a lot of talent on that team. What was good was that the league was really balanced. The one problem with the MISL was that nobody could compete with New York, and they were going to win the championship every year. So, yeah, you had a chance to run for the championship, and we did. And they won the championship the year before I got there, and then at the end there when I left. But I stayed in touch with all those people, and I still am. As a matter of fact, coincidentally, I follow a group on Facebook called Hot Winter Nights, the history of indoor soccer in Kansas City. Today is the day every year because they repost their same posts daily, and they just recycle them every year.
It's Brian.
So I know
Holland.
Every year on
Brian
this
Holland,
date,
I think, is behind that, right?
Brian Holland, absolutely. Yeah, he's a great guy. On January 19th, I can look at that site, and they're going to have the Kansas City Star clipping of me announcing my resignation to go work for funny car driver Whit Bazemore on the NHRA tour as his general manager. So that happened today in 96.
Okay. So, but also it's another situation where Kansas City is now essentially in the shadow of the previous Comets, which were a thing for sure, not unlike the Steamers in St. Louis.
Yeah, same thing. I basically went from one of those fires to another. Of you're following up a team that was dearly beloved or all around town, sold tons of tickets, kids wore the uniforms. I mean, both of those teams were just so successful and so popular. And I joined the teams that replaced them. So it's a tough gig, and it is hard work. But
describe the difference
of all the jobs I had. When hard work felt like hard work, you had to put up with it. When people are screaming on the phone, that's another thing. When coaches aren't being nice to you, that's another thing. In indoor soccer, it never felt like work.
Yeah, it beats pouring cement for a living, I'm sure. So describe the differences from your memories of what the NPSL was like versus that of the last legs of the MISL. Like clearly they recognized they had to be a little bit different. Obviously the scoring system was different, the markets were different. What else did you what was better or worse about the NPSL in the 90s?
Well, the players, unfortunately for them, didn't have much choice about how much they're going to get paid. And that league, Steve Paxos was the commissioner, and he was just adamant that the salaries had to be kept in line. I mean, at the end of the MISL, there were guys making hundreds of thousands of dollars. And these guys, when I got there, were lucky to be making 35 to 40. And most of them had jobs or had their own camps or were assistant coaches at local colleges. That's how they did it. But like I said, I think the thing that differentiated it was that whole, we're all in this boat together. This is what we've got left. Let's all pull together. Let's all row the boat. And everybody did. And the teams cooperated greatly with each other on ideas. We had meetings where we'd share hey, we sold 8,000 extra tickets because we did this one game, and we weren't competing. We were all one big group to try to make it work, and we all loved the sport, and because of the salaries, the team, like I said, there was parity in the league. Good soccer. I personally could not tell you the difference other than, okay, we didn't have Stan Stamenkovic or Steve Jungle, but other than that, the rest of it looked pretty much the same.
And a lot of it was East Coast and Midwest, largely, with a few exceptions, right? It was
you had San Diego.
Yeah, the AISA had its roots basically as very Midwestern and very smaller market Western.
Very much. Rockford, Canton, Dayton, place like that.
But this was a bit of, hey, MISL is gone, but we're still here. And how about the points differences and the 2-point shots, the 3-point shots? How did you feel about that stuff?
I was ambivalent at the time. Everybody was looking for a gimmick, Heck, they changed the penalty rules every year too. This was crazy. And that was just, there wasn't a good enough captain of that overall ship. Steve Paxos tried as hard as he could, but he was the guy who was the general manager of the Canton Invaders in the AISA. So that's what he knew. That's where he came from. And here we are, and he's trying to run the whole league. And there were some renegade teams out there that didn't want to follow the rules. And I'm not talking about breaking the rules of the game or anything like that, but I got in trouble because we were playing the Milwaukee Wave in Kansas City, and we played a 5-minute video after introducing them, and they were standing on the floor, and we did that between introducing them as the visitors and the attack as the home team. And Keith Tozer, the coach of the Wave, called the league office the next day. I got a blistering phone call from the assistant commissioner saying, "You'll never do that again. You'll never play that video." Keith Tozer said it was 20 minutes long. And I stopped him and I said, "Look, you can fine me $5,000. You can fine me $50,000, but you're not getting a penny out of me. That video is 5 minutes long because it was played the Van Halen song Right Now. And that song is 5 minutes long. So I don't know what Keith told you, but we were getting a little bristly then with each other. And but still, I thought the soccer was great. And the players were fantastic. You couldn't, as a general manager, you couldn't ask for a better group. The first thing those guys did on Monday every week was pick up their packet of all the places they each had to be that week for free to sign autographs. And they were running all over town 4 or 5 days a week. I'm making hundreds of appearances. And our summer camp was very successful. And we were getting there. We were getting to where, we were doing pretty well. We were playing well. I could sense that we were turning the page a little bit on selling tickets. Heck, in our first year, I increased our season tickets by 300%, but that's because they had almost none. So, but all of a sudden another phone call comes, and I hate to jump ahead, but this is how it works with me, right? And it's this funny car driver named Whit Bazemore, who's just gotten his first major sponsorship from RJ Reynolds for the Camel brand. It was Smokin' Joe's. And he called me and said, I've never, he knew me from when I was working for these low buck guys, and he was one. He said, I don't really know how to do this. I need you. We're based in Indianapolis. I need someone to come in here who knows what they're doing and help me with the sponsor and grow this sponsorship. I can't afford to lose it. So would you be interested? And I walked into the attack office the next day and announced that I was leaving. And
wow,
2 days later, I'm in Indianapolis.
You have an amazing knack for getting phone calls and then being convinced very quickly. Now, in this case, though, you left on your own accord this time from the attack, right?
Yeah, correct. I did.
Okay. All right. So now, So now it's clear now you've got a duality going on here. You've got the indoor soccer thing and the NHRA thing which are, you wonder how those things go together. They clearly don't.
They don't.
Because this is here's the interesting speed bump to come now that I truly don't see coming, and you probably didn't either at the time.
Right.
So tell me about then how indoor soccer makes one last stand in your life here. Because when you're in Indianapolis, you also had a cup of coffee or something with the This other indoor league, which you probably, just for our audience, we've had conversation about it, but you also can remind us what
Right.
this league was all about too. Tell me about all of that, because I don't see the straight line for this coming either.
Yeah, the CISL was the Continental Indoor Soccer League. They came about as an alternative to the end of the MISL and the early NPSL. A lot of West Coast teams. They put an expansion team in Indianapolis. I was working for Whit Bazemore there. Whit and I had a good friendship and we got along well, but there were some sides to it that both of our personalities didn't mesh very well.
And racing teams, by the way, around that time, not necessarily known for their marketing chops per se, right?
Correct.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So I think that's also part of it, maybe sort of unspoken thus far, right?
Right.
These marketing deals come along or how they get them and all that kind of stuff. But the reality is we're not talking about like these modern, even today, it's racing first and the money is kind of, hopefully comes along
it's different. It's way different now. I mean, these men and women, especially in drag racing, they know where their bread is buttered, and it's the sponsorships. And between the first time I ever walked into an NHRA event versus now, you can't compare. It's the big leagues compared to rookie ball when I first started. So there's a lot of money involved, many millions of dollars, and big sponsorships and expensive equipment. And so anyway, I'm working for Whit, and again, another phone call, and it's a guy named David Goins who tells me he just heard I'm in town. I'd been with Whit for maybe 5-6 months, and we were doing okay, but I wasn't getting, I'll put it this way, with a sponsor like RJ Reynolds, I wasn't getting much to do because you couldn't just write press releases and put them out. They had to have everything passed by their lawyers. They would red mark every press release to make sure it didn't have anything in it that would besmirch the smoking of cigarettes. And it was difficult for me as a creative writer to narrow myself down like that. And Whit knew it. He knew I told him once, I said, for what I'm allowed to do here and what you're paying me, you could probably get a girl from junior college to come in and do this as an intern, because that's all I'm doing. I'm not allowed to be creative. So anyway, this David Goins cat calls me, and he had heard somehow, I don't know how, I still to this day don't know how, that I was in Indianapolis and I had been the general manager of the Attack. And so he's now the owner of the Indianapolis Twisters in the CISL. Would I consider coming down and interviewing to be their general manager? I said, sure, absolutely. I mean, I was frustrated with not having enough to do with Whit. And as much as I thought he was a great guy and a terrifically talented driver, my gosh, won a lot of races. And so I went down to, they didn't have their office in Market Square Arena. It was in a building 2 blocks away. I go sit down with him and his brother, who, again, kind of like Don Popovich with Milan Mandrich, his brother had talked him into doing this because his brother was a soccer fan. And we're going to do great. We're going to make money. It's going to be fantastic. And they were bleeding money. And I'm sitting in this meeting. I said, well, tell me about the staff you've got here. Well, they had 2 PR people, which is odd. I didn't know any teams in any sport that had 2 PR people. They didn't have 1 salesperson. And they had 1 girl who was in charge of like merchandise, but she had already ordered it all. It was all there. So she didn't have anything to do. She just sat in her office with the door closed. And I said, well, you don't have anybody selling tickets. Well, I didn't think we had to. I just thought we would just announce we were here. And I'm shaking my head like, you guys got a lot to learn, man. And they said, what's it going to take to get you to come here and help us? So I blurted out $90,000 a year. And I mean, they said yes before I could even finish that line. And I'm like, shit, I should have gone higher.
So this is in 1996, correct? Was this after they had gotten the team, but the team had yet to play?
Yes, no, they were playing.
They were playing. Okay, so let's also put this in perspective, right? The difference between the CISL model, well, there are a couple of different differences, but also, and the NPSL, certainly number one was the season. The NPSL was sort of this classic fall, winter, early spring thing. The CISL was completely a truncated summer league kind of deal.
Correct.
That was supposed to kind of help aid arena owners and maybe team owners in those arenas and other sports to have
Exactly.
more dates for their facilities, right? So this is
Yeah.
if you're a player, this is kind of a cool thing if you can figure it out, right? Where you can play year round in both of these leagues if that's possible. But this is a
Yeah.
different dynamic, right? That you were used to from the NPSL.
Correct. And by the way, there ended up being a couple lawsuits about that where NPSL owners, I think maybe even Don Kincaid at the Attack, sued players for jumping to the other league just for the summer and said, no, you got a contract with us. It goes year round. But the players were just trying to make a living, man, So
Yeah,
I don't even remember.
You could argue that's a restraint of trade, right? It's like, okay, well, you're dormant 3 months of the year. What am I going to do?
Yeah, exactly. So there was all that, but gosh, I went to one. So yeah, they did play in the summer, and they had a game.
I'm sorry, you came in. I'm sorry, I didn't interrupt you,
Yeah.
but you came in the midst of this first season in 1996, the spring, early summer. Yes.
Yeah, correct. It would have been June, July, right in there.
And what are you walking into?
Well, fear after I met the owner and heard that they didn't have anybody selling tickets, didn't have anybody doing promotions, thought that this would just magically work if they opened the doors and people would come in. So a little bit of, I knew I had a mountain to climb, but I was ready for that. I love that. I love those challenges. And that I thought we could straighten it out. So that night they had a home game. I went over to the arena, walked over 3 blocks to the arena. There were maybe 3,000 people there at Market Square. The soccer was great. It looked to me exactly like the NPSL, didn't look any different. The production was pretty much the same, tiered cheerleaders and smoke machines and all that stuff. And I remember thinking there's only 3,000 people here, but there's life in this arena. I've been in arenas where, there's 5,000 people and it's dead. And those people were there because they loved it and they were having a great time. And I remember turning to whoever was sitting next to me and saying, oh, this can work. If we just get 6,000 people in here, then and they're like this will catch fire in Indianapolis during the summer. It'll absolutely go crazy once people, because there's that whole, you need the significant amount of ballast there to keep it all together. And once people see that other people are going, that creates the wheel turning for you. And I was absolutely convinced it could work. But until then, and I'm trying to straighten out this staff, and I guess it was still the first week I was on the job when we had another home game. And because I'm the general manager now, I get the phone calls, and it's the person who runs Market Square Arena. And I don't remember if it was a woman or a man, but she said, or he said, hey, you guys haven't paid the rent, and we're locking the doors tonight until you do. I'm like, oh, great. I had no idea about any of this. And I'm like, fantastic. Let me call you back in 15 minutes. So I went and saw the owner, and somehow he scrambled and got them enough money that afternoon. It might have been in cash. I don't know. And then the next night we played again, and they called me and said, okay, now this time, you host some of your sponsors and other VIPs and people you're trying to impress in our hospitality area, our VIP lounge. We're not opening the doors to that or supplying you any catering until you pay for that. And I walked over there and paid for it on my American Express card. I was like, well, we got to play. This is 2 hours before game time. And I'm like, I don't have time to go sit in my owner's office with him crying and we can't, we got important people who might want to sponsor this team, can't get in the VIP area because it's locked. So I knew I was in trouble, man. It was going to be too much, I thought, at that point to really fix. And Roy Turner was the commissioner of that league, famous coach. And he came to try to save the day. And of course, the owner only thought that he was there to take over and kick all of them out and take over the franchise himself. And I met with Roy, and I knew that he was over that. He didn't want to do that. He just wanted to save this franchise. And so, I met with him and we talked about anything we could possibly do together. And it wasn't getting any better. And then he came up with the idea that the Indianapolis Ice of the International Hockey League already were in the building. They had a full staff. They were a winter sport. other sports have tried this. It doesn't always work, but as an act of desperation, would we merge with the ice and have their staff run everything because the staff is in place and they fill the arena? Why wouldn't we do that? And I said, why wouldn't we? David didn't want to do it. He was like, they're just trying to steal my franchise from me. That's all they're trying to do. We had 3 or 4 meetings. We brought the lawyers in. It all got ironed out. The ice is coming in. I was going to be the general manager. David was still going to be the de facto owner. And we were going to use their front office. And we called a press conference in my corner office on the 8th floor of that office building. There's a podium. I'm standing behind it. Every TV station in Indianapolis is there. Every radio station. We are going to announce that we're merging with the ice, and it's going to be great, and everybody's going to love it, and it's going to be the rebirth of this team, the Twisters, that people do like, but they haven't gotten on board yet. It's really going to be great. It's just about ready to take the podium and the microphone when David walks in the room, our owner, with the contract, makes a very big display of holding it a foot above the podium and letting it drop and slam into the podium. And he says, I've thought long and hard about this. I'm not doing it. I'm not signing it. I'm folding the franchise immediately right now. And I had 100% blindsided. No clue he was going to do that. And so there I am again. No team to work for. And David called the whole staff together and fired them all. And he called me in and he said, so we're going to have to let you go. And I said, David, you might recall that when you hired me, I specifically asked for a personal services contract with you, not with the team. And he looked at me kind of blank face and said, yeah, you're right. I have to pay you. I said, yes, you do. And he goes, well, I know for a fact the rules are that unless you come to work, I don't have to pay you. If you don't come to work, I can just fire you. I said, you're going to see me every day. What time you want me here? And so I literally went to work for a couple of weeks, just sitting there, but I wanted my money, man. So, and he had already bounced a number of paychecks to me. There's indoor soccer for you. To the point where when we got paid every 2 weeks, I took my check directly downstairs to the bank in the lobby of our building and cashed it. So I could take cash to my bank and make sure my bills got paid. As I learned the hard way that the first time I just put a check in the bank and started writing bills that they all bounced because the check bounced. So, so I'm sitting there and I'm like, David, we got to just come up with something here to do. This is stupid. You're paying me good money. You're paying me a lot of money to sit around and do nothing. I said, why don't we talk about getting into motorsports and maybe either sponsoring or owning a race team? And he didn't know anything about it. He's like, tell me about it. Tell me about it. He got all excited. And I told him about it and about Norman Wilding, my British funny car driver, and that we could make this happen. And it just didn't. He didn't want to pay enough, and it wasn't going to work. And I went home that night and thought, God, okay, get your head on straight here. Who can I call right now at NHRA and see what's out there? Because they know me now. And I got a phone number for a funny car driver named Del Worsham, who had a team with his dad. They worked out of their house. They were a low buck team. They weren't sponsored. And I talked to Del, and I come up with a real risky proposition. I wasn't sure how I was going to do it, but it seemed like a good proposition. I said, if I can come up with $100,000 and give you guys the $100,000, can I own all the signage on the car? You get to pick like the 5 or 6 spots you need your special people on, but for the primary sponsor on the car, I own that now. And if I can sell it for $1 million, I make $900,000. And Dell said, absolutely. We'll take that $100,000 right now, and I hope you make $900,000. So that allowed me to get the heck out of Indianapolis and go to work for Del Worsham. And geez, I only spent 12 years with him. Was named PR rep and team manager of the year by the NHRA. And Del and I, the first week I had joined him, he called me and said, this is great. You're going to love this because this never happens. He calls me and says, I just got a call from this company called CSK Auto. I guess they own a bunch of auto parts stores like Craig and Auto Parts. And they asked if they could sponsor me. Should I tell them to go away? And I said, no. get back on the phone and say yes. And so he did. It was $200,000, which was nothing. But they had pitched a couple of other teams 200,000, and those teams just told him to pound sand. There's no way. You couldn't hardly put the car on the racetrack for 200,000, much less race it and win. So we got that sponsorship with CSK, and that first year was 200,000. 12 years later, when CSK was bought by O'Reilly Auto Parts, and therefore we lost our sponsorship, our deal with them was about 3.5 million with 2 funny cars and 4 big rigs on the road. And we had won 30 races by then. So it all turned out pretty good.
So this is so clearly the sort of meat of the story here is you finally kind of latched on and stuck with the NHRA stuff, right? And that obviously was and maybe perhaps you got married in 1997, had something to do with it too. You kind of settled down, if you will, from a career perspective, and doubled down on the racing thing. Let me ask you this though. What of your soccer experiences, right? Clearly the Twisters experience probably left the bitterest taste in your mouth.
Right.
But we've had Ronnie Weinstein on this show. We've had Keith Tozer on this show. We've had other people talk about the CISL. We had Ken Tomash, the voice of the Twisters, on this show.
How about that?
The world of soccer and professionals in the professional ranks in the United States has been just crazy. And I think, people of a certain age don't sort of recognize, today how relatively stable professional soccer is today, relative to where it was before.
Yes.
What prevented you? Clearly that was still part of your background, right? And still maybe, I won't call it a love, maybe it's a heavy like, in your past, but what prevented you from ever going back to it? Was it just that you were stabilizing with the NHRA thing and you were doing well by it? Was there any pang whatsoever to go back to soccer, especially given that Major League Soccer had started up around 1996 in the wake of the World Cup? Or were you just completely done with that part of your life and God bless?
I wasn't. By saying done, it sounds like you washed your hands of it and stormed away. But no, I wasn't going back. I was with
because
Dell
of the instability, or because you had moved on to something that was more stable in your professional life?
All of the above. The instability was obviously on you every day, like a wet blanket, right? You never knew who was going to fold, where the league was going. You just never knew. And I loved the game, but it was so hard. It really was a job that would wear you down. And I loved it. And I loved the sport, but I fell in love with the NHRA and with the Worsham family. And they did something that none of these other bosses I had ever thought to do, which maybe was their fault. They handed me the reins and said, "This is yours. We're going to run the race car. You run the company. You run the sponsorship. You make it all happen. We trust you. It's all yours." And I'm like, that was a breath of not just fresh air. It was like a jolt of adrenaline. And boom, I couldn't have been more happy. And I was happy for, well, it ended up being 22 years between Del Worsham and another driver named Tim Wilkerson, who I worked for after we lost our deal with CSK. And that was another one of those stories. CSK finally called us and said, O'Reilly's not going to sponsor you guys. They're taking over our company. So we're done, and we hate it. We love you guys. You guys were everything we ever wanted. All of you were just fantastic, but we're done. And so I was like, oh, now what? And then, so we lost our deal, and then I'm again, not sure what I'm going to do. And my wife, I'm married by then, and we were living in Austin, Texas. And I told her, she knew all about it. I was telling her all about all the things that were going on with CSK. And I finally told her, I said, look, it's done. We're done after this year. They're going to keep sponsoring us through the end of the season, and that's it. And she said, what are you going to do? I said, she goes, are you going to start taking resumes to the track? And I said, they all know me now. I'm pretty sure at the next race, I'll have 5 or 6 teams find me and ask me what I'm doing and see if I'm interested. And sure enough, it was that next weekend we were racing in Dallas. And I think 7 teams came up and asked if I'd be interested in at least hearing what they wanted me to do for them. It was Krista Wilkerson, who I loved. She's Tim Wilkerson's wife and just a dear friend of mine still to this day. Wonderful lady. She was standing underneath the tower. I walked up there. There's cars running right next to us. It's noisy as hell. Funny car fumes in her face. And she just grabs my sleeve and says, listen to anybody out here you want. Don't say yes to anybody until you talk to us. And I said, you got it. I promise. And 2 days later, I flew home and then flew down to Springfield, Illinois, to where Tim's shop is, walked in and said, I'm not doing this on the phone, man. He looked at me like, what are you doing here? I said, I'm not doing this on the phone. I want to look you in the eye and make sure that we're on the same page, that you're going to have me give me the same responsibilities and the same position that I had with Dell. And he looked at me and said, done. You got it. It's yours. Take care of everything. I love my sponsor. He's a wonderful guy. I've had him for 10 years. I want you to meet him. Let's go over there right now. I'll introduce him to you. You'll be the point person for everybody. And that's how it worked. I mean, it just, boom, all of a sudden I'm in my second family racing operation, and it's a dream job. It was just a dream job. I got to 2015 and with Tim, and we had won a bunch of races and such close friends. And, we still text each other constantly. And I got to 2015 and I got about halfway through the season. And when you're Diamond Elite on Delta, that means you travel too much. I was married. My wife worked for IBM as an executive. She traveled a lot. So she traveled Monday through Thursday every week. And I traveled Thursday through Monday to go to a race every weekend. And it was burning me out, and it was burning her out, the travel was. And I'm a stressful traveler. I got that from my dad. You get there 2 hours early, you worry about this, you worry about your seat, you worry about your airplane, you worry about missing a connection. And I just worried about everything. And I finally just came to the decision, like, all these years, I'm a good storyteller, because when we have a beer after the race any night and I start telling stories, I look around and there's 20 people listening to me, and they're like, keep going, keep going. And a lot of them say, you need to write all this down. You need to write a book. And I went to Tim and Krista and I said, I hate to do this, but I think I have to write a book. And I can't write 15,000 words a week as a PR guy and write a book. It's just physically not possible. And tears in their eyes, both of them and mine. And they said, you have to do it. You got to do this. We won't replace you. We don't know how, but yeah, I would not get in your way of doing this dream of writing a book. And that's where we are today. I'm working on my 5th one right now.
All right. So a couple of roundup questions, and we're going to let you promote. And by the way, we'll promote the heck out of not only that book, but also the other stuff too. And frankly, ostensibly, the reason I originally found you was through the Forever Highlanders book, which should be a separate conversation for another time. So let's put a note in for that. So a couple of roundup questions. And number one, right, you kind of ended your pro sports career with a good 20-year run in and around NHRA stuff, right?
Correct.
Would you have done your path any differently if you could look back and start over again? Or was this the necessary manner by which in the 1980s and largely 1990s that got you to this inevitable capstone 20 years or so? Did you have to go through all of that to get to where you wound up?
That's a deep philosophical question, and I have pondered it. And the only answer I have is, well, we can't go back and change it. And I don't think I would, because every one of those crazy plow forward dominoes tripped over the next one. And as you heard, I mean, this is a series of amazing coincidences, good luck. And I think the luck, honestly, I toot my own horn, I think the better you are at what you do, the luckier you get, because people know it. And when you establish a reputation for being a guy who can walk in and make an impact, unless it's fruitless, unless it's impossible, people are always going to be interested in seeing what you can do for them. So No, I wouldn't go back and change a single thing. Even the heartbreaks and the times I was so depressed, I didn't want to get out of bed because, things were going poorly for me at the time, or whoever I was working for, or whatever job I had. But I look back on it now, and by and large, I don't think anybody could convince me to go back and change a thing. Not one thing.
Second question, what of other sports that might have been other segues for you? There had to be dalliances or considerations perhaps in other minor league, major league, fledgling new leagues. But interestingly, it seems to have hewed pretty closely to both this quote unquote indoor soccer craziness and NHRA drag racing.
Well, another great, you know what? I'm going to give you credit. You asked really good questions.
Hey, I've been doing this for too long to not.
There we go. Well, how do I explain this? Knowing what I knew at the time, and like I said, when I was working for my brother, we managed IBM's sponsorship of Major League Baseball. I knew by then that a Major League Baseball front office was hundreds of people. You're going to get lost trying to find your office. So that didn't really appeal to me too much. I did coach for one summer with the Blue Jays up in Utica, New York, in their rookie league team. I thought about that, and I actually talked to a couple teams about it because I had that bit of carte blanche, my dad's last name, me, things I had done. I talked to the Padres and I talked to the Angels about being a coach or manager in the minor leagues, and they both said the same thing. You'd be great, but our coaches and managers have to throw batting practice. Can you do that? And my shoulder was shot after my playing career. I could play catch, but I at that time I probably needed rotator cuff surgery, and I just didn't want to do it. And I knew that trying to go there every day and throw 3 hours of BP, I could not handle that. So I had to say no. I probably am lucky I didn't fall for doing something with a minor league team, because that would have been more my speed at the time. 10 people in the front office, get out there and actually sell the tickets and meet the fans, that sort of stuff that I love. But I didn't pursue that. I don't know why. Probably because back then there were no independent leagues. They were all affiliates of major league teams. So you really had to go through the major league team to get to be part of one of the minor league teams. And I just didn't see that as something that I could do. So at the time, looking back, excuse me, looking back on it now, a couple of buddies of mine and I feel pretty lucky that there weren't all these independent leagues. That would have changed my life, because I probably would have signed with one of those teams and played another 8 years. And then I'm 30 something. And what am I going to do? I got no experience doing anything with baseball. And I probably would have been suckered into doing it because I love the game so much. I love playing. All those things put together, there wasn't really any other thing I wanted to do. Once I found drag racing, that was the holy grail to me. And that's just how it went.
All right. Well, here's the last question. This is a bit more of a look forward kind of deal here. So there's, kids today, right? They're still enamored with the whole, and maybe have a bit of a hagiography around sort of what it can be to sort of have a job in pro sports, right? It's clearly a different realm today, right? The amount of money just in the last 5 years, right? It's just been gargantuan. Private equity and inflating the valuations of the major league teams and frankly creating a whole new layer of, makes the 1970s look like a plaything when you look at all the new leagues and how many different leagues there are and new sports and stuff. There's no shortage of new franchises and investment and all this kind of stuff. Can anybody have a similar kind of career path and or I don't want to say fly by the seat of their pants, but depend on the luck of experience and the connections and that kind of stuff? I guess a little bit of that is needed anyway, right? In any kind of career, especially sports. But can we replicate today what you went through in the 90s? Or is that just a different realm today in pros, because pro sports is so corporate and invested and all that kind of stuff? Or is there still the whimsy and the chance and the happenstance to get these jobs and gigs and opportunities?
Oh, there's the happenstance. That could happen. I mean, I think of the independent, like the Frontier League in baseball. Those are small franchises with 10 people in the front office. You can come out of junior college and get a job there. I would never advise anyone to approach a career the way I did. I'm very fortunate. You know, that series of phone calls the morning after are just, if it wasn't true, it would be impossible to believe, even for me. So no, I used to tell people, like, you know, I did this, it worked for me. Do not copy what I did, because the chances of two different people having all that good fortune and building that reputation and using that to have more good fortune and finally finding the holy grail at the end where you're not only thrilled and happy, but you're a big shot and you're well known. I was writing a blog then for NHRA.com. I had 10,000 readers. I will never forget the first day Del Worsham and I walked into the track at Pomona, and 3 people ran up and he got ready to sign an autograph, and they asked for mine instead because they read my blog. And that blog wasn't about the race car. It was about me, the PR guy for Del Worsham, and what it was like to do my job at that time. And Del turned to me with a smile on his face. He goes, "Man, you've made it. Here you are. You're getting to sign autographs too." And I'm like, "Man, this is it. I wouldn't give this up for anything." And those are still some of my greatest memories, best friends. And I will say one thing in closing about what made drag racing so great for me, you know, that winning and losing thing. Every final round at an NHRA drag race, when it's 2 cars are left after going through the whole ladder, they're side by side, they're standing at the starting line, they're staging the cars. 5 seconds from now, or these days 3.5 seconds from now, one of these teams is going to win and go crazy, and the other team is going to hang their heads and walk away. Every final round in the NHRA is a walk-off win. You know it. One of those teams is going to walk it off. And that thrilled me. And there was never anything in baseball, even hitting big grand slam home runs in my career, there was nothing as exuberantly joyful as that moment when the win lights come on and you just won and possibly, likely just beat John Force. You know, the greatest racer ever. And that joy that comes out of you, I'd never experienced that anywhere else. And that's addictive. And yeah, you'll go through another 3 months of being lucky to get to the semifinals, and then you win another one and you get the taste again. And it is just a drug. It is so amazing to be a part of that and to be a legitimate part, not just a hanger-on or a fan, to be right in there and be part of it. And that's why I loved drag racing so much.
What would you advise somebody trying to make a career in sports in their early years today that maybe you wish you could have known earlier, in making your name and getting that reputation and getting to those next levels?
You're talking early years. You're talking about their early years as age-wise?
Yeah, there are today kids looking for advice, let's say. Besides not following your career path, what would you advise them to do that maybe you wish you could have done or should have done?
Well, I don't know if I wish I could have done, but this is the advice I would give other people, and because I see it all the time. You know, I'm a boomer, right? A baby boomer, and I look at these kids today, and they are all instant gratification. That's all it is. That's why they're on TikTok all day. That's why they are just constantly flittering around to different things they're going to do. And in NHRA, I saw so many talented young kids come in, work very hard to get their resumes out, finally land a job doing some PR for a team, and leave after a year because someone offered them something else. And I'm like, that's something I was guilty of myself, but it bothered me that they were giving up so soon. And stick with it. And you know, there were a handful of other guys and women who were like me in drag racing, who were like lifers, stay until the end, or until I quit to write a book. And they all became kind of legends. And we all talk every now and then on the phone about, remember that guy? God, he worked for Ron Capps and never saw him again. And it was like they don't have the patience or the dedication, I think. to really gut it out, because it's not easy the day you get there. It gets easier the better you get at it, right? So a lot of them just don't have that patience and dedication to get good at it. And then that's when the emotional and the financial riches come to you. So I didn't do it that way myself, but once again, I would never have anybody do it the way I did it.
And here's the last question. Do you still consider yourself like a sports fan? Do you still follow NHRA? Are you still, or is sports too much? We're recording this during the National College Football Championship right now.
Right.
With all the kids moving around with the NIL and the money and the directly paid now and stuff, I don't know. It gets harder and harder for me, at least, to be a fan, but I still want to be. Can you?
Yeah, I am still a fan. Every morning I check the St. Paul Pioneer Press TV schedule to see if the Wild or the Timberwolves are playing, because I'm going to watch. We had Twins season tickets for a long time. We just got to where we were so busy we couldn't use them enough, and spend a lot of money on season tickets and give half of them away to your friends. That didn't seem to make a lot of sense to us. You actually would spend the same amount of money just buying really good box seats 4 times a year. So we did that, but yeah, all the local teams. I still follow the Cardinals. I'm a Cardinal at heart. My dad was a Cardinal when I was born. So, or actually a little before when I was born, but he was a Cardinal, and I still have all those connections to all those teams, and I'm still a fan for the game. And I watch football like with everybody else yesterday. I don't let myself get too bothered with the behind the scenes stuff and the salaries. As far as I'm concerned, if it's not the players' fault they asked for that much and got it, it's the owners. So yeah, I still am a huge sports fan, whether it's soccer, indoor soccer, baseball, football, basketball, you name it. I'm a sports fan, and I always will be.
All right, my goodness, what an adventure. And it continues for sure in the book, which I cannot recommend highly enough. It is long, but you will want still even more from it. And it's a great read, and will take you in all kinds of different twists and turns and pivots and divots into the underbelly, I guess, of pro sports and challenger leagues and minor leagues and teams and relocations and all that kind of stuff. There's a ton of racing stuff in there with the NHRA and the funny car stuff. It's truly an amazing book, and you will probably not be able to put it down once you get started. But that's the point. That's why people like Bob Wilber do these books, because they've got great stories to tell, and we are just more than excited to share some of them with you. And the book is called Bats, Balls, and Burnouts, A Life of Sports, Marketing, and Mayhem. It is available, as they say, wherever good books are found. But of course, you can follow our convenient links here in this week's show description, and your podcast feed are there, or at our website at goodseatsstillavailable.com, where we post all of our episodes for your convenience. All you got to do is search up this episode, which is numbered 433, myself and Mr. Wilber, and you will find the convenient links there as well to our friends at Amazon, where you will get either the Kindle or paperback versions of this amazing trove of stories. And we'll get some shekels of referral love, a handful of shekels of referral love, I will say, that we put into our tip jar to pay the rent around here to keep our little show going for you each and every week. And we appreciate you considering and or purchasing through those means. That helps us very much, more than you'll know. You can follow the further adventures of Bob on Facebook. He posts often at Bob Wilber. On TikTok, you'll see him at Bob Wilber Author. He's trying to help other aspiring writers overcome the hurdles of writing their own stories, especially people in the realm of sports and promotional marketing and stuff. So we could use more of those. That's the Lord's work for sure. But probably you should bookmark his website for the most thorough understanding of his past, present, and future. And that's bobwilber.net. And Wilber is spelled Wilber, bobwilber.net. While you're online, again, our website, goodseatsstillavailable.com. We've got our sponsors featured there, and all kinds of fun pictures and whatnot related to every stinking episode we've ever done here. Tell your friends, and that's just a great place to bookmark and learn more about and search, frankly. If you like, you think this is a topic that we may have talked about over the 7+ years we've been doing this show, there's a little search bar in there. It's all convenient there. And for you to search, browse, and hopefully enjoy. You can follow us on the various socials. We are at Good Seats, still available in most places, with the exception of Blue Sky, where you'll find us at goodseatsstillavailable.com. Or on X, you'll find us at Good Seats Still. Follow us in any or all of those places. If you'd like to send us some email, well, you can do so at hello@goodseatsstillavailable.com. And of course, our thanks to the great Jerry Payne for his audio excellence once again this week. And we thank you for listening, of course. More to come. It's springtime, or getting close to it, we hope. And many, many, many more stories and conversations coming your way. Keep your feeds live and fresh. More to come. Take care.